Hey, this is Scott Allen Miller, and I'm here on Sam IT on YouTube, and today we're going to talk about front-loaded engineering. What we mean by this is doing a lot of engineering up front on a project that's going into production, or that's where we mean it. It's an important term and something that a lot of people don't spend a lot of time thinking about, even though we're all kind of aware of it. And what we are looking for in recommending front-loading engineering is that if we take the time to do things right up front, we'll have fewer problems later. And this may sound obvious, and it's the kind of thing that, that's just something people say, and of course we always think about that, but it's not really something that people take very seriously when going into productions. In a lot of cases, you'll see people say, or think at least, or act in this way, that they will say it's really important to get systems up and running very quickly, get it into production, we'll fix it later, or they may not say it, but they'll do things like build systems and document down the road. And of course the documentation never comes, as we well know. And in some places like documentation, this may seem pretty simple. The engineering is really getting it up and running. The documentation can kind of be excused. But when we're looking at something a little bit more advanced, like a well-maintained server, doing front-loaded engineering may mean doing things like not just documenting up front, but doing heavy automation and scripting and making sure that systems are easy to maintain in the future, are self-healing, will report automatically, will log, things like that. And if we want to take it to the extreme, which we often do, we may be looking at things like state engines and document-driven architectures, software-defined infrastructure, or something of that nature, where the front-loaded engineering is even bigger, but the amount of administration at the back end gets to be less. So this is an interesting concept, that the more we front-load engineering, the less administration we have to deal with later. So it's a very important concept because during the time that we're doing engineering, in theory, we're not in production. So taking time to quote-unquote do it right doesn't impact users or systems. But if we don't take that time to do it right, we increase the risk later that things are going to need more planned, or even worse, unplanned downtime or maintenance headaches or whatever. So front-loaded engineering is something that's very important but often overlooked in IT and a lot of other places. If we really look at kind of a graph of effort, the more there's kind of a common area under the curve, and the more that we move a large curve of effort into our engineering space, into our pre-production time, this can give us a lot less area under the curve of maintenance effort during our production and administration time. So this is something I want people to think about, and it's a term that I want to be able to use in a lot of instances in the future, and I want everybody to understand that the idea of front-loading engineering is putting in effort before things go into production so that we need less effort after things go into production. Or we could think about it another way: we're taking our risks before we go to production, things could fail, and less risk during production when impact is very, very important. So just to give a concrete example of an extreme case, a traditional server might be, let's say, a web server. We may go in, do a ISO-based install, have a very common web server, do a manual install of, say, Apache or IIS, manually move the files into place, manually set up the backup, and once everything's running, let it go. This is great, except until something goes wrong, we may not even have documentation about how we got there, let alone we may not know how to get back to a working state. All kinds of things may have been missed. What if we need to grow? We have to do this all again. It's not repeatable, things like that. If we did a lot of front-loaded engineering, we may go so far as to define the entire system in a state engine and keep testing every little change that we make to make sure that the system does exactly what we want it to do. And then when it's time to go to production, instead of using a system that we built iteration by iteration, we may go to the state engine, do a fresh build, and have the entire system be built for us for production through automation. taking essentially 99% of administration duties and moving it into the front-loaded engineering time. Sure, the engineering may be 2 or 3 or even 4 times as much, maybe even more than that. But the effect on administration and production long-term is dramatic. It completely changes the needs to do things like troubleshoot problems. Why spend time troubleshooting when you can, in an instant, rebuild a system that's identical to the one that worked before and not worry about the one that stopped working, or troubleshoot it offline after the production system is already repaired and running on another machine. So, front-loaded engineering, very important concept. I hope that everybody learned something today and can find this useful. And again, I'm Scott Alan Miller, and remember to like and subscribe, and look in the show notes for links on where you can have a discussion on this and other topics.